Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mediums in Action with me, Martin Litt-Wilson, and my good friend and expert medium, Ian Doherty.
Good morning, Martin. Hello, everybody.
How are you doing, Ian? You had a good week? Have you been doing many readings?
Yeah, the readings are picking up. You know, people are wanting to know more about Korea now, which is quite, it's a sort of an obvious thing because people want to know, A, if they still got a job, should they change job, whatever, and what's coming up. So people are looking positive. It's not negative. You know, I've not had calls where people are absolutely, sort of down and out on their last legs, bless them. But everything is wanting that change, really. You know, how's it been? How's it been for you, Martin?
Yeah, interesting. I've been doing a few courses here and there. I've been doing a weekly course with a gentleman called Krishna Das, who have you ever heard of Ram Dass?
No.
Basically, Ram Dass and Krishna Das were both in India in the late 60s, and basically Ram Dass went into the philosophy, and Krishna Das went into something called kirtan, which is chanting, and it's about connecting with spirit, with the spirit of God or whoever you see as God, and it's fascinating. It's interesting. I'm not a singer by any means, and I remember my guitar teacher when I was young saying, "Look, I can't teach you anymore because you're just utterly tone deaf." So, but I really enjoy it. It's really nice. It's connecting with your heart, and I almost see it very similar in pattern to working with your chakras. Now I work with the original chakras as I've grumbled before that the chakra system is utterly wrong as the Western philosophy sees it. But this is interesting. It's about part visualization. It's about part meditation and mindfulness, and also it's the exploration of chanting is very therapeutic, very very and I found it very very interesting, to be honest. It reminds me, and this is going to sound such a bad example, Ian, so I apologize. But it reminds me of when we used to go into things like places like Hellfire Caves or the caves under the Galleries of Justice.
Yeah.
And often to raise energies, we would kind of hum, kind of get everybody to go, and we would do that for a while, and the vibration would really feel electric. And I think it was part psychological, but also as well as I don't know whether it's interesting about the vibration. It just seemed to spark things off, and I think it got people relaxed as well, and then spirit was able to come forward. But it's very similar in that respect. So, I found it very, very fascinating.
It's nice to hear about what you're doing because you're going into the Eastern philosophy more, which I find interesting. With what you were telling me and what you were learning, and Madame Blavatsky and all that sort of thing. And I just feel it's sort of captivating of how you're doing things, and how we're sort of going along similar pathways, but in a different way, So hopefully, really good things to come.
Yeah, I think. Do you know what's? I think I'm a wanderer. I always admit that to anybody, but I do wander. I do wander through systems and beliefs, and one thing that I'm finding is unifying threads through all of this, and the unifying threads are, and here we are. Here's another journey that I'm on at the moment. I'm taking like an introductory course on the Sufi religion, and it's interesting. The first part is we dive into the ocean of the beloved and connect with the spirit, and I just love that. Dive into the ocean of the beloved.
It's lovely.
And these sinews that I'm finding and connections between them it just reaffirms my belief in the spirit world. It also reaffirms that the universe in some form is consciousness. And I think it's a beautiful thing to behold different religions and different beliefs and different systems of approaching the same subject and ultimately having the same results. The enlightenment that we hear from Buddhism or from other religions, this connection with a higher self is consistent but different. And to attain it, you can do different things. So it's beautiful. It really is. It's beautiful. And I would suggest, all of you listening to this, if you see a free course, just take it. Where's it going to take you? You never know what insight you get. So anyway, let's get this podcast started. So, do you know one thing? What really irritates me about skeptics and when they talk about mediumship or even poltergeist activity, is that actually it's a mental disorder. That it's actually kind of that somehow that us being mediums must be schizophrenic, or we or there's something wrong with us, as they say. I mean, I hate using that term because I work with a mental health charity. So I hate all that terminology. I always feel it's a get out. I mean, what do you feel about it when people say? I mean, you've obviously studied the mind.
Yeah, people. Sorry, Martin. Go on.
No. Carry on.
Yeah, people. I've heard people say, "Oh, it's bipolar," but you're right. I have a keen interest in how things work. The mechanics of how spirit are able to communicate and functionalize their thoughts in a way that is taken up by the body in the same way as natural senses, what we see, hear, taste, smell, and they can convey a lot of things via what is termed as cross modality, and by that, we can see a picture, or a video of an apple pie, and we can smell it and taste it, so seeing something evokes the taste and the sort of the sense of it all. Plus, it brings memories. Oh, Nana used to make that, or great uncle or great auntie used to make the best apple pies ever. So it brings back a lot of memories, emotions. So there's loads in there. And I was looking into it because I have one of the ways that my guides work with me is that I see months of the year in colour. So for instance, June is a sort of quite a how can we put it? It's electric blue, but if it's the beginning of the month, it's a lighter colour. If it's at the end of the month, it's a darker colour of that same shade, and days of the week are the same, like Saturday's black, Sunday is charcoal, Monday's white, so when it's if somebody asks me a question, when is so and so going to talk? I get a flash of blue, then I get say a flash of what day of the week it is, and then I get a date. So on times it could be, for instance, I might get blue white 15. I say, oh, it's Monday the 15th of June, and I look on the calendar, and Monday's the 15th is Monday is the 15th.
Wow.
So it works that way. But people put over that is a cross modality with the language centre and the hearing centre. If I'm wrong in this, ladies and gentlemen, and you're a scientist, please get in touch so we can have the proper information, please. But it is these, spirit will functionalize your personality in all of this, So yes, you will hear voices, and it is your own thoughts. Those of you listen to this podcast, just think in your mind now, I'm going to buy Ian a pint of cider when I next see him. Yeah. Well, I've got a hope, haven't I? And then you can put in that sort of sense. The way that sounded in your mind is the way spirit will sound in your mind until you have the ability to discern spirit talking in dialect. It might be a Geordie, a Scottish, a Liverpudlian, a Birmingham. There's very much there. But I had I had a couple of people sort of get in touch with me, and they were really sort of I was their last reach out. You know what I mean? They didn't know what to do, where to go. They found me on the internet, and I do feel that was very much spirit led. Back in about 2004 and 2005, and one lady said that she's hearing voices and crackling. So I said, yes, that is because of blah, blah, blah. And she'd been to see a doctor. The doctor said straight away, you're schizophrenic, and give her tablets. So she was thinking, I have a mental illness. And unfortunately, in this day and age, there's still a stigma to it all, isn't there? So she was worried, am I gonna lose my mind? And I talked to her, rationalise with her, help her to understand how the mechanics of spirit work. And now she's fine. But I've had a couple of people, and that's what really brings me to this topic. Really, I did some research, and there's no correlation between psychotic episodes. That's you call it hallucination, whatever, and spirit or mediumship.
No.
There isn't anything. Schizophrenic, multiple personality disorder, any of those situations where you have the potential to have multiples within your mind. And I really do feel, apart from the Victorians, at some point they would, I think you probably know more on this topic than me. They were having more mental institutions where spiritualism was more prevalent. Am I right in saying that, Martin?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, in those days, obviously, from what we've learned visiting some of the institutions around the country, and just having a child out of wedlock could end up with you being in one of these institutions. It was classed as a mental illness.
Yeah.
If a woman showed an interest in politics, again, they would be sent to an institution. So I people say, well, we're living in a mental health crisis, and more and more people are going to their doctors and saying, no, I'm seeking help. And that's because the stigma has been broken down, and people are now recognizing that they do have issues, and it needs to be sorted out, which is fantastic. Is people should be able to seek help, and it's saying what's happening with suicide in that now it's having more recognition. There's more help than ever to address it. It's not so much as a stigma, and I think this is the whole thing is with the paranormal. It reminds me very, very much of a lot of artists and writers of the past.
Yeah.
Is in the 80s, I used to see. I used to. I'm a big fan of James Joyce, the Irish author, and I once read a review of a collection of essays and stuff, and how they seemingly dismissed him in the 80s was he was probably a closet homosexual. And then I've read that time and time again about Danny Kaye, the actor. Oh, he was probably a closet homosexual. And I'm thinking, what does sexuality have to do with anything about any of these writings or things? And that's how they used to dismiss people in the 80s. And now what people seem to do, and I was reading the other day about a particular poet, I think it was Maya Deren or something like that. And they said, oh, she was probably bipolar, or she was probably autistic, or he was probably this, or he was probably... Why do people with no knowledge of this subject feel that they can say, oh, because they portrayed this artistic extent that somehow they are they are they are this or they are that. It either comes down to their sexuality, their gender, or that they might have mental health problems, when actually they just might be very creative people. And I think this is the same with the paranormal, and I've seen it time and time again. And I always remember I can't say who this was, but I was doing, it was like a student sort of debate on paranormal. And we was talking about poltergeist. Somebody raised a question about poltergeist, and the professor who I was talking with said, "Well, you name a case where paranormal activity really." And I said, "Well, what about Enfield case?" I said that was pretty interesting. And he said, "Well, it was obvious." He said the heightened emotions caused the poltergeist activity. I said, "So you're saying puberty caused poltergeist activity?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "So you've stepped outside the realms of accepted science then, because what you're saying is a physical change within the human body and hormone change caused the non-physical to interact with the physical world."
Yeah.
And he kind of stood there for a while. I said, "So you are actually trying to rule out paranormal activity by saying that it's something that is still actually paranormal. The fact that your hormone changes could actually kickstart paranormal." And for a long time, and actually I had a discussion about this today, but for a hell of a long time, people were saying that young girls were responsible for paranormal activity. And I argued that I think this comes all the way from the Fox sisters. That
Yes.
And I think that's been kind of bred into paranormal research, is that somehow young women, you've got the Rosenheim poltergeist activity where the young girl, which we talked about the other day,
yeah,
she wants to go home, and the phone phoned 1,000 times within like an hour or something.
Yeah. Speaking clock, wasn't it?
Yeah, so you've got the Rosenheim, you've got the Enfield case, and it's been dismissed that, the reason why is because these girls were either in puberty or just going out of puberty, and therefore had heightened emotions and therefore causing the paranormal activity, which again smacks of Victorianism, because
it does.
Because when people were talking about politics, as I said, she's talking about politics, she must be mentally ill. That's what they were like in the Victorian times. And this is the problem with mediumship, is one way they can get rid of mediumship in an argument is it's some form of schizophrenia. It's some form of mental illness. That's what it's about. But what none of these people, and again, I argued this with the same professor from earlier. The thing is, I said, yeah, but one thing that you're not discussing, and the one thing that you're not prepared to look at, is the evidence.
Yes.
And he said, what evidence? I said, well, if you don't know what the evidence is or what supposed evidence is, you've not actually properly looked into this. You've not looked at the messages that people give. Yes, you could say, it's cold reading. But let's break it down. There is an underlying percentage within mediumship where the messages that come through and the messages that you give or the messages I give, there is a knowledge and understanding in there that goes beyond just my understanding. It must come from some outside source. I'm happy to argue why that outside source is, whether it's spirit or whether it's some sort of matrix or whether it's, but you cannot dismiss it if these professors or these skeptics have not looked at the evidence in depthly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my argument, so shut up.
What would be of interest just popped to my mind, so to speak. Now they can adequately sort of source the entire gene code of the gene, the genome of a person. The millions of coded bits. You know what I mean? And when you sort of look at it. And then they can tell if a person is susceptible to this disease or that illness, whatever. I wonder if they had a sample of, let's say, 50 mediums, practicing mediums perhaps, and 50 non-practicing mediums, if they would notice anything that is turned on or switched on in the genetic term, that prepositions people to mediumship. Is there, because spirit always tell me it's in the genetics, and I thought, on a surface thing, it was, grandmother, mother, daughter, and so forth. But no, it's in the genetic pool of families, but it's in the core of what do you call it, genetic makeup. Like we have blue eyes, brown eyes, red hair, brown hair, black hair, blonde hair.
Yeah.
It's in that coding. So if scientists were able to sort of look at it or have the interest to look at it, then, because it's almost like a needle in a haystack with all of that sort of information, in millions and millions. But it'd be interesting to see if it is actually there.
Yeah, I totally agree. We just need a rich millionaire to fund this research now.
I know, that's it.
But no, genuine.
So.
If you're listening to our podcast, just get it. But no, you're right. It would be intriguing to see that, to see if there's any correlation or DNA breakdown where there's a strand that somehow. And the reason is as well is because this is a belief in the magical community as well, and I think this whole bloodline thing in the magical community has been taken the wrong way and taken geopolitically, I think. But certainly it would be interesting to see how the DNA breaks down and whether there is something in there. We often look at things too much from a psychological point of view, and don't forget psychology is only 100 years old. It would be great to see the DNA, to see the physical evidence side of this, and see how that is. But I do really think that we must, or there must be movement on saying that that mediumship is somehow related to mental health. It's one of those things that mental health is prevalent. But to say that your own mediumship is some form of mental health issue is utterly wrong. I know schizophrenics. I work with a health trust in Scarborough, and nobody reports anything like this at all. And saying, "Oh, you're hearing voices" is a form of schizophrenia, and it's not just that. It's far more complicated, and it's far more than just what people experience as mediums. So it's actually an insult as well to those people who actually suffer with with this as well. I think it's a real insult, and I think also as well is it could also hinder people coming forward. So this conversation really should stop, utterly stop. So if you disagree with us, folks, please do get in touch. We really would be interested in what you think about this, whether from your perspective as a medium or a medium who's starting out or wherever you are on your journey, what you feel about this. Let us know. We'd be very, very interested. And also as well is if you've got any questions you would like to answer, we open this up and we're very happy to dedicate a podcast to your questions and try and give you more insight into what it's like being a medium and a psychic. Thank you very much again, Ian. I hope you've enjoyed it today.
Thank you too, Martin, and thank you to all our listeners for your continued support. Bless you.
Absolutely. There's some incredible people out there, and the list is huge. I mean, when we started off, there was only a handful of people who were supporting us, and now we get lovely messages and interactions from people on our Facebook page and emails, and it's really nice. It really does drive us forward, and we see you all as a part of our team. And thank you very much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please review. Please put some ratings on there. It all helps us get more visibility, which would be very, very grateful. And thank you to you, Ian, as well. Thank you very much, and we'll be talking soon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Martin.